What's the one thing that all of us want? Money. I mean, have you been on Instagram lately? Everybody's filthy rich, going on yachts, driving Lamborghinis, trips to Bali. Everybody wants more money. But if we're all rich, then nobody's rich. Very philosophical, I know, but it is true. For one to be rich, it sometimes requires others to be poor and to inevitably lose. And that's exactly what you're going to see in this video today. So the question is, what would you do to get rich? I mean, the opportunities these days are endless. NFTs, crypto, buy a bank. There's like 12-year-old kids doing this, scamming people out of $30,000.
That I was born too early. It seems like a pretty nice racket.
You could start an OnlyFans and make $43 million a year.
Maybe I wasn't born too early. I should give that a try.
Or you could be like the guy in this video and create a scam so powerful it dupes thousands of people out of millions of dollars, all the while making you filthy rich so you can afford anything in your wildest dreams. Would you do it?
Well, obviously.
What's up, guys? I'm Jared. This is History Bits, the channel where I have not made a single dollar, but I can teach you what it takes to be rich with knowledge. And boy, do we have something special for you in this episode. Today we're talking about Charles Ponzi. You know, the guy behind the infamous Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, that doucher.
Whether you love him, which I don't really see how you could, or you hate him, which I definitely see how you could, you have to admit that he left an imprint on the finance world as we know it. And that is a world that affects all of us on a daily basis. So today we're going to learn about what he did, who he was, and where he did it. And we're going to take a look at what a Ponzi scheme is, how to avoid them, and why these idiots keep trying to scam people in the first place. So let's jump right in. It all began in Italy. Thanks a lot, Italy.
They did give us the Rizzler though, so that and Olive Garden. I can't really be too bitter at them.
On March 3rd, 1882, a man named Carlo, Pietro, Guglielmo, Tebaldo,
3 hours later,
Ponzi was born in Lugo, Italy. His family was middle class. And while the family wasn't rolling in the dough, they found a way to put food on the table. His early years were marked by academic success. He showed flashes of ambition and brilliance, so he gave it the old college try at the University of Rome. He studied economics. He had big hopes that he was going to become a big-time businessman and make millions of dollars.
The amount of money I'm going to be making would hurt your parents' feelings.
But shortly after arriving at school, it took a backseat. He was more concerned with living like an aristocrat. Lavish meals, shopping, alcohol, chasing women. He wanted to do it all. He really just wanted to be like his rich classmates, but he was spending money that he didn't have just to impress other people. That sounds familiar, but you do got to admit he was successful at doing so.
And that's a fact.
Ponzi would not finish his studies and would eventually drop out of college. He decided to do the popular thing of the time and head to America, where the streets were paved with gold, or so he thought. In 1903, Ponzi left Italy and immigrated to the United States. He arrived in Boston with little more than the clothes on his back. Oh yeah, on the boat trip, he got on the boat with $200, but he gambled and drank all that money away. By the time he landed at Boston, he had less than $5. When he landed in Boston, he really didn't speak hardly any English, so he had to work manual labor jobs that he felt were way beneath him. For a time, he even worked as a bank clerk, where he learned the intricacies of banking and finance. And this is also where he learned to scam. He worked for a boss named Luigi Zarossi, who ran a bank tailored to Italian immigrants. Zarossi promised huge returns if they deposited their money with his bank. In reality, all he was doing was taking new customers' money to pay out old customers, and the cycle would repeat. This bank would soon go out of business, not surprisingly, and Ponzi would be on his own yet again. But Ponzi was always looking to be mega rich. You know, you drive a BMW, you're in a country club, you can afford to send your kids to private school. No, he wanted private jet money. The interesting thing about him is that before he became infamous, he actually did try to do some legitimate businesses. And this is really the most interesting point that I always think about. Were these guys con artists from the start? Did they try to go legit and then got in over their head? How exactly does this all play out? I'm sure it's a little bit different for each person, but that's what I'm most intrigued about. With these SBF and Bernie Madoff types, I always wonder from the start, were they gonna screw people over and do whatever it took to get rich? It's really confusing. And I think it's confusing because I keep getting caught in the middle of all these scams. I was at Fire Festival and got burned by Billy McFarland. I got screwed when I invested with Bernie Madoff. I even took investment advice from SBF. Screw this, I'm just gonna start putting money under my mattress. But unfortunately for the world, Ponzi's dreams of going legit never materialized. In 1908, Ponzi was arrested for forging a check. This would be his first of many mishaps with the law. A few years later, he would be arrested for stealing $5,000 worth of cheese while working as a commodities broker.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
His time in prison was relatively brief, but it planted the seeds for his future endeavors. By the time he got out, he knew he had to build wealth, no matter the cost. So let's get into the spicy, screwing everybody over type stuff. Before he became a household name for his investment scam, Ponzi was involved in multiple fraudulent activities. These ranged from simple swindles to more complex crimes. While in this Atlanta prison, he learned from other inmates and started to brainstorm on different ways that he could make money while he got out. In Atlanta, he also learned about the greatness of Waffle House. After he got out, he worked on a few things, but his big idea was his Italian postage scam. And the scam itself was pretty straightforward. Ponzi realized that the postal service in Italy sold international reply coupons, which allowed people to prepay postage for international mail. These IRCs could be redeemed for postage in various countries, and Ponzi believed that the value of these coupons would differ depending on the country. By exploiting exchange rate differences, he thought he could profit from arbitraging the coupons. So how did it work? Ponzi bought the IRCs in Italy at a lower price and tried to sell them at a higher price in the US, where the coupons were worth more. The problem was that Ponzi's understanding of this arbitrage was flawed, and the trade was unprofitable. This is the birth of the Ponzi scheme. So what is a Ponzi scheme? Ponzi scheme is a type of fraud where returns are paid to earlier investors using the money of new investors, rather than from profit earned by the business. Eventually, the scheme collapses when there are not enough new investors to pay returns to earlier ones. But you already know this, you're like me. You put your entire life savings into FTX. So enough about me and exactly what I'm doing. Let's get back to Ponzi. Ponzi's most notorious scheme began in the late 1910s. He was still really fascinated by the postage stamp idea, and he wanted to really get into the minutiae to see how he could make this idea work. He claimed that he could purchase IRCs from foreign countries at a steep discount and redeem them in the US for a substantial profit. He promised investors huge returns, up to 50% in 45 days or 100% in 90 days. Who can say no to 100% return in 90 days? And this is a time before the internet. I don't think people are particularly savvy investors now, but this is way before you could Google anything, and people didn't really have time or access to books to where they could learn about investment strategies. In reality, Ponzi had no access to the international postage system or the actual IRCs, which is kind of important to doing your job. Instead of buying and selling the coupons as promised, Ponzi was simply taking the money from the new investors and giving it to his older investors, which created the illusion that he was immensely profitable. He would have lines wrapped around the block of people that were just dying to invest with him. And he preyed on poor people, laborers, immigrants, people that didn't really have a penny to their name but were dying to make some extra cash. He would gladly take their money and rip them off. And ripping off poor immigrants is bad enough, but when you're ripping off poor immigrants from your own country, just makes it extra scummy. By the summer of 1920, Ponzi was now running a multi-million-dollar scam. At this point, he was paying out like $1 million a week, which, I mean, that's a lot of money now, but in 1920, that was an insane amount of money. He began to buy limousines and suits and nice properties and nice meals for investors anytime that he could. And even though he was married, all the honeys in Boston wanted to see that new grill that he was rocking. Bang, bang. At the height of the scheme, Ponzi was bringing in $250,000 a day. His offices were packed, his name was known everywhere, and it seemed like he finally fulfilled his dream. But as anyone with a basic understanding of economics knows, a business without profits is doomed to fail. Except for Uber and Rivian and Lyft, Snap, DoorDash. I don't understand the tech industry at all. What finally brought the scam crashing down was a couple things. First and foremost, the Boston Post newspaper wanted his head on a spike. They just felt that his guaranteed returns were too spectacular, that nobody could beat the market the way that he was doing. So the editor of the Post, Richard Grozier, smelled something fishy and knew he had to follow up. He put his best man on the job to look into Ponzi, and this is exactly where the facade started to show some cracks. More journalists and financial experts started to look at Ponzi's business under the microscope and realized that these profits simply did not add up. Experts in the stamp trade told authorities it was simply not possible to acquire the amount of wealth that Ponzi was simply by using stamps, basically proving that there was no legitimate business that was generating these returns. And that was it. The collapse of Charles Ponzi's empire was swift and dramatic. In August of 1920, the financial experts in the Boston Post finally exposed the fraud, which they would end up winning a Pulitzer Prize for. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, and all of it was revealed. It was estimated that Ponzi had defrauded investors out of around $20 million. That's around $300 million today, which, not bad, but Bernie Madoff stole $65 billion. Could you imagine the feeling that he had when the walls were caving in, knowing that he had burned through $65 billion? Oh my God. Ponzi's arrest and trial became a media sensation because the controversy was so widespread. Thousands of people had invested their life savings and were left with nothing. Most of the money was gone, and many people lost their homes, businesses, and livelihoods. In 1922, Charles Ponzi was convicted of mail fraud and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was released after about 4 years for good behavior, but he shouldn't have enjoyed his freedom for too long, because the feds got him the first time, and the state said, hold on, we're gonna slap you with another 7 years, so get your ass back in jail. While on bail, he went down to Florida and scammed a little bit more. You cannot make this shit up. After getting caught in Florida, he was deported back to Italy and would never step foot on U.S. soil ever again. He also never regained another great fortune. He died on January 18th, 1949, at the age of 66. But Ponzi will kind of live on forever. I mean, he didn't want to go down in the flames that he did, but he's a household name. And I wish that I could say that there was a happy ending in this story, but there isn't. And these crimes still go on a daily basis. Ponzi created a chain of scamming that has continued and will continue forever. We probably didn't create it, but it is how it became a household name. And at this point, you're probably thinking like, why? What's the point? I mean, if you're these guys, you're doomed to fail at some point. Eventually, the walls are going to close in, and you're going to be left having to answer a lot of questions. Not to mention the hundreds, sometimes thousands of lives that are destroyed. But it boils down to a few things. The first and most obvious is money. The promise of quick and lucrative wealth sounds amazing when the other path to success is slow, takes hard work, and promises nothing. Secondly, people are just kind of desperate. Many people live their lives in a financial struggle and would do anything they can to change that. And some fraudsters, I don't think most, but some, may feel that the only option that they have is to rip others off. But most importantly, none of these con men ever have empathy towards the people whose lives that they destroy. And we can't forget about those that are defrauded. Many want to provide for their family and make as much easy wealth as they can, and I can't blame them for that. But financial success is rarely quick, and it's almost never easy. Okay, well, it's not easy for most of us. Dude, stop showing OF girls paychecks on here. It's starting to hurt my feelings. That's why I listen to Prof G when he tells me that he can help me get rich slowly, the boring way. So to avoid the mistakes of others, here are a few ways to identify a Ponzi scheme. Unusually high returns. One of the clearest signs of a Ponzi scheme is the promise of unusually high returns, often much higher than what is typically available through traditional investments. Lack of transparency. Ponzi schemes are often vague about how the investment works or refuse to provide clear documentation or explanations. Pressure to invest quickly. Fraudsters behind Ponzi schemes often push potential investors to act quickly, urging them to invest before the opportunity closes. This was something that Ponzi was really smart about. He actually didn't do that. He would play it cool and not want to show his hand and tell the person, hey, when you're ready, you come to my office, we'll talk some more, and then you can invest, which ingratiated him with the person because he wasn't too pushy. consistent, guaranteed returns. In legitimate investments, returns can fluctuate based on market conditions. A truly risk-free, consistently profitable investment is extremely rare. Difficulty with withdrawals. If you find it difficult to withdraw your money or a pressure to leave your funds invested, this is a major warning sign. Too much focus on recruiting. In a Ponzi scheme, if you're told that the key to making money is bringing in others to invest, it's likely a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme. Charles Ponzi's life was marked by his crimes. I mean, he had a habit at his core of deceiving others for his own financial gain. His infamous Ponzi scheme became a textbook example of fraud and continues to serve as a warning to all that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is.